My name is Heather Williams, and at 65, cooking has always been how I express love. For 40 years, I've poured my heart into family meals, especially for my only son, James. Last spring, I spent 24 sleepless hours preparing his anniversary party feast recipes passed down through generations, each dish crafted with trembling hands and hopeful heart. Never did I imagine those words would escape his lips as he stood among laughing friends. "We'll just feed it to the dogs." Before I share what happened next, where are you watching from today? Give this video a like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to someone you love. James came into this world on a snowy December morning in 1982, the most beautiful 7-pound baby boy, with his father's blue eyes and my stubborn chin. Thomas, my husband, used to joke that James got all our best features and none of the bad ones. We were young in love and blissfully unprepared for parenthood. Thomas worked construction while I stayed home with our son, pinching pennies, but rich in happiness. That simple life shattered when Thomas died in a worksite accident just after James turned 5, leaving me a 28-year-old widow with a kindergartner to raise. Those first months after Thomas passed remain a blur of grief and fear. I remember sitting at our small kitchen table, bills spread out before me, realizing that my part-time library job wouldn't keep a roof over our heads. I had no college degree, no specialized skills, just a determination that my son wouldn't suffer any more loss than he already had. I took 2 jobs, receptionist at a dental office during the day and waitressing 3 nights a week. My mother watched James when I worked evenings, but during the day, money was too tight for childcare. Every morning, I would rise at 5 to prepare meals for the day, lunch for James's school lunchbox and dinner that could be quickly reheated when we got home exhausted. Cooking wasn't a passion then. It was survival. My mother had taught me the basics: how to stretch a pound of ground beef into a hearty meatloaf that would provide sandwiches the next day, how to make chicken stock from scraps that would become soup. I clipped coupons religiously and learned to transform humble ingredients into nourishing meals. James was 6 the first time he stood on a kitchen chair beside me to help bake cookies. His little hands covered in flour, face scrunched in concentration as he carefully measured sugar. "Are these for someone special, Mommy?" he asked. I remember kissing his forehead and saying, "They're for us, baby. We're special enough." That moment changed something between us. Cooking became our language, our special bond. When I couldn't afford the expensive toys his friends had, I compensated with themed birthday cakes, a fire truck when he was 7, a baseball diamond when he was 9, a detailed skateboard when he turned 12. His face would light up with more joy than any store-bought gift could have provided. James developed favorite dishes that became our family traditions. My mac and cheese with the secret ingredient nutmeg, though he didn't know it until years later. Sunday pot roast that filled our small apartment with comforting aromas, and his absolute favorite, apple cinnamon pancakes on Saturday mornings. The recipe came from Thomas's mother, connecting James to the father he barely remembered. When the recession hit in the late 80s, we almost lost our apartment. I had to take a 3rd job doing office cleaning on weekends. James was 10 by then, old enough to understand our struggle. One evening, I came home to find him in the kitchen attempting to make dinner. The pasta was overcooked, the sauce from a jar, but he had set the table with our mismatched dishes and even picked a dandelion from outside for a centerpiece. "You always take care of me," he said. "I wanted to take care of you tonight." I cried that night after he went to bed, not from the stress or exhaustion, but from gratitude for this compassionate boy I was raising. As James entered his teenage years, like most adolescents, he began pulling away. His friends became more important, his interests shifted, but no matter how late he stayed out with friends, he never missed our Sunday dinner tradition. Even during his most rebellious phase, when he dyed his hair black and wore ripped jeans I couldn't afford to replace, he would sit across from me at our small table and devour my pot roast, telling me about his week between bites. When James received his college acceptance letter, the first in our family to go to university, I baked a special cake to celebrate. He had earned a partial scholarship to State University, and I had been saving every spare dollar since he was born. It would be tight, but we would manage. The pride I felt watching him pack his belongings into my aging sedan couldn't be measured. College meant care packages. Every month I would send boxes filled with homemade cookies, banana bread, and other treats that wouldn't spoil. His roommates apparently looked forward to Mama Williams' care packages as much as James did. Those packages were my way of sending love across the 200 miles that separated us. It was during his sophomore year that James met Amanda. The first time he brought her home for Thanksgiving, I knew she was special by the way he watched her when she wasn't looking. Amanda came from a comfortable middle-class family, but she had none of the pretension I had feared. She praised my cooking genuinely, and even asked for recipes. When she and James announced their engagement during their senior year, I welcomed her with open arms and an engagement dinner featuring all of James's childhood favorites. After graduation, James entered the financial world, securing a position at an investment firm through one of Amanda's family connections. Their wedding was lovely, but far grander than anything I could have provided. Amanda's parents covered most expenses, though I insisted on making the rehearsal dinner myself, a labor of love that earned compliments from even Amanda's food critic uncle. As James's career advanced, I noticed subtle changes. Our weekly phone calls became monthly. Visits grew shorter and more distracted. When they purchased their first home in an upscale neighborhood, I brought a homemade meal to help them celebrate. James seemed almost embarrassed as he quickly put the casserole dish in the refrigerator without opening it, eager instead to show me their new wine collection and the gourmet kitchen they rarely used. Still, I held on to food as our connection. Christmas dinners, occasional Sunday visits, these became the threads holding our relationship together as James and Amanda climbed the social ladder. I told myself it was natural that he was building his own life, that the distance I felt was just part of children growing up. But deep down I wondered if the boy who once made me overcooked pasta was still in there somewhere beneath the expensive suits and refined manners he had adopted. When James called to mention that he and Amanda would soon be celebrating 15 years of marriage, I immediately offered to cook for their party. There was a moment of hesitation on the line before James said he'd have to check with Amanda. 2 days later, Amanda herself called, her voice warm with genuine appreciation. "James mentioned your offer to cook for our anniversary," she said. "That would be wonderful, Heather. You know no one cooks like you do." I later learned that Amanda had convinced James to accept my offer. Whether from sentiment or practicality, I was grateful for her intervention. The chance to contribute meaningfully to their celebration filled me with purpose. I began planning immediately, creating a menu that would showcase my best dishes while accommodating the sophisticated tastes James and Amanda had developed. Their anniversary fell in April, perfect timing for spring flavors. I envisioned a buffet-style service with elegant appetizers, hearty main courses, and a show-stopping anniversary cake. For weeks I collected recipes, some from my personal collection developed over decades, others from James's childhood, and a few new ones I thought would impress their friends. I created shopping lists, timing schedules, and contingency plans. My small apartment became a command center for Operation Anniversary, with notes covering my refrigerator and dining table. The week before the party, I spent $370 on ingredients, a significant portion of my monthly fixed income from Social Security and the part-time bookkeeping job I still maintained at the library. I chose premium cuts of meat, organic produce, and specialty items from the gourmet shop across town. The splurge made my budget tight for the month, but seeing James proud of my cooking would be worth every penny. I noticed troubling signs during my planning conversations with James and Amanda. 3 times we had to reschedule our call to finalize details because of James's work commitments. When we did speak, he seemed distracted, answering my questions about guest preferences with vague generalities. "Just make whatever, Mom. People will eat anything," he said during our last call, the dismissive tone cutting more than he knew. Amanda tried to compensate for his indifference, providing thoughtful answers about their friends' dietary restrictions and preferences. "The Johnsons are vegetarian," she explained, "and Michael is avoiding gluten. Oh, and James's new colleague Harold is quite the foodie. He vacations in France just for the restaurants." This last detail added pressure. A foodie. My recipes were family-style comfort food, not haute cuisine. Would my cooking meet the standards of someone who dined in French restaurants? I added a coq au vin to my menu, practicing twice to perfect it. 7 days before the party, I created my preparation timeline. Some dishes could be made days ahead and frozen or refrigerated. Others required day of freshness. I would need to work straight through the night before the event to ensure everything was perfect. At 65, the prospect of 24 hours on my feet was daunting, but determination outweighed concern for my arthritic knees. Among my planned dishes were several with deep emotional significance. My mother's Swedish meatballs that had graced every family celebration since my childhood. Thomas's favorite corn pudding, a recipe from his Kentucky grandmother. The apple tart that 5-year-old James had helped me make the day after his father's funeral when finding small joy seemed impossible but necessary. Each recipe connected generations, told our family story. I wondered if James remembered the significance of these dishes, if he would recognize the corn pudding as a link to the grandfather he never knew. Food was never just sustenance in our family. It was memory-love continuity. The physical demands of my ambitious plan worried me on quiet nights when I couldn't sleep. My hands, increasingly stiff with arthritis, sometimes struggled with fine chopping and delicate decorating work. My right knee, injured years ago when I slipped at my waitressing job, throbbed after long periods standing. But I had strategies: a padded mat for the kitchen floor, scheduled sitting breaks, and over-the-counter pain relievers to get me through. 6 days before the party, James called while I was prepping shopping lists. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to mention we might have a few extra people." "How many is a few?" I asked, pen poised to update my quantities. "Maybe 10 or 12 more than we discussed." His casual tone suggested this was a minor detail. I gripped the phone tighter. "James, that's nearly doubling the guest list. I've already done all my planning based on 20 people." "It'll be fine," he said breezily. "Everyone just takes smaller portions at these things anyway. They're more interested in drinking and socializing than eating." After we hung up, I recalculated everything, adjusting quantities and adding items to my shopping list. The budget stretched further, but I would make it work. I always had. As the party approached, my anxiety grew about impressing James's wealthy friends. Would they look down on homemade food, preferring catered delicacies from trendy restaurants? Would they see the love and skill in my traditional cooking, or dismiss it as old-fashioned? Most importantly, would making this meal help bridge the growing distance between my son and me? I pushed these worries aside and focused on the practical tasks ahead. I would pour 4 decades of cooking experience into this meal. Even the most sophisticated palate would appreciate food made with such care. And surely James, despite his changed exterior, would recognize and value the love served on each plate. The Tuesday before the Saturday party, I began advanced preparations: toasting nuts, making chicken stock from scratch, baking cookies that would keep well. Each task was a step toward showing my son that I still had value in his world, that the skills that had sustained our small family through difficult years could still bring joy to his new life. Friday morning dawned, clear and bright, perfect weather for the next day's celebration. I rose at 5 after a restless night, my mind racing with checklists and timing sequences. My small kitchen awaited counters cleared and ready for the marathon ahead. I'd borrowed an extra cooler from my neighbor to hold additional food since my refrigerator couldn't accommodate everything. I began by organizing ingredients into stations. Baking supplies clustered near the oven, vegetables ready for chopping by the sink, proteins in the refrigerator arranged in order of use. The familiar ritual calmed my nerves. Whatever insecurities I felt about James's new life in my kitchen, I was confident and capable. The appetizers came first: savory cheese straws, using my grandmother's recipe that required careful hand-rolling of delicate dough mushroom caps, stuffed with herbed cream cheese and breadcrumbs and bacon-wrapped dates that James had loved since childhood. Each item required different techniques: baking, sautéing, broiling, carefully timed to maximize my oven usage. By mid-morning, sweat dampened my collar despite the spring breeze through the open window. My hands worked steadily, muscle memory guiding me through familiar recipes while I consulted notes for newer additions. The scent of baking pastry filled the apartment as the first batch of cheese straws emerged golden and flaky from the oven. The main courses demanded the most attention. The coq au vin needed hours of gentle simmering to develop its rich flavor. I browned chicken pieces in batches, carefully deglazing the pan with Burgundy wine that cost more than I would typically spend. The beef tenderloin for Saturday would wait until morning, but I prepared its mushroom sauce ahead, a family secret involving dried porcinis soaked in brandy and a touch of sour cream. Midday brought a quick break, 10 minutes to rest my feet and eat a sandwich while standing at the counter. No time for sitting properly. I checked items off my list, satisfaction growing with each completed dish. The deviled eggs were perfectly filled, the vegetable platters prepped and covered with damp cloths, the Swedish meatballs rolled and ready for their final cooking tomorrow. As afternoon stretched into evening, fatigue settled into my shoulders and lower back. The kitchen timer dinged constantly, pulling me between multiple tasks. When the corn pudding emerged golden and fragrant from the oven, I felt a pang, remembering how Thomas had always claimed the corner piece. Would James remember this dish from the few years he had with his father? The world outside grew dark, my small kitchen becoming an island of light and purpose. Neighbors went to bed while I continued chopping, stirring, seasoning. The rhythm became meditative. Taste, adjust, move to the next task. My refrigerator and cooler filled with completed dishes covered in plastic wrap, each container labeled with reheating instructions. Midnight arrived as I prepared the pasta salad with sun-dried tomatoes and artichokes. My eyelids grew heavy, but I pushed through, knowing sleep would mean falling behind schedule. I put on music, old Motown hits that James and I used to dance to in our kitchen when he was small, hoping the familiar tunes would energize me. At 2 a.m, I attempted to rest, setting my alarm for 30 minutes. Sleep eluded me as my mind raced through the remaining tasks. Had I remembered, the vegetarian option for the Johnsons was the gluten-free cornbread properly separated to avoid cross-contamination. After 20 restless minutes, I returned to the kitchen, deciding productivity was better than anxious half-sleep. Dawn broke as I worked on the potato gratin, thinly slicing 5 pounds of Yukon Golds on a mandolin, my fingers increasingly stiff and sore. The pink-orange sunrise filtered through my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the counters, now crowded with completed dishes and works in progress. 6 hours remaining. My body protested each movement, but the end was in sight. I discovered I had run out of fresh thyme needed for the roasted vegetables. A moment of panic, until I remembered the small herb garden on my apartment balcony. The plants were just beginning their spring growth, but I managed to harvest enough tender stems, silently thanking my foresight in planting them. The final hours focused on the anniversary cake, a 3-tier creation with layers of vanilla bean cake, raspberry filling, and buttercream frosting. Each tier required careful baking and cooling before I could assemble them. My hands trembled slightly as I piped decorative borders and arranged fresh berries on top. The cake represented the pinnacle of my skill, a testament to 15 years of James and Amanda's marriage and my enduring love for my son. As I worked on the delicate cake decorations, memories flooded back. James blowing out candles on his 7th birthday, the small graduation cake I'd made when he finished high school, the rehearsal dinner dessert from his wedding. Food had marked all our significant moments, telling our family story in sugar and flour. With just an hour before I needed to transport everything to James and Amanda's home, I surveyed my kitchen. Every surface held completed dishes, appetizers, salads, side dishes, main courses, and desserts. The sink overflowed with dirty pans and bowls. Cleanup would have to wait. My back screamed in protest, and my hands felt like they belonged to someone much older than 65, but pride pushed the discomfort aside. The anniversary cake stood as the centerpiece of my efforts, perfectly balanced and beautiful. I carefully placed it in a special carrier, securing it for the drive across town. The remaining dishes were packed into insulated containers and coolers, each labeled with serving instructions. Some needed reheating, others were ready to serve, all represented hours of labor and decades of love. As I loaded my old sedan with the precious cargo, exhaustion competed with anticipation. Soon I would see James's face when he witnessed what his mother had created. Despite our growing distance, surely this expression of love through food, our oldest language, would remind him of our bond. I imagined his friends impressed, James proud, our relationship strengthened. Through this offering of the only wealth I had ever possessed, the ability to nourish those I loved. With everything securely packed, I took one final look at my devastated kitchen, closed the door, and began the drive to my son's home, hopeful heart racing, despite my bone-deep fatigue. James and Amanda's house sat in an upscale neighborhood where mature oak trees lined smooth sidewalks, and each lawn looked professionally maintained. Their 2-story colonial, with its crisp white siding and black shutters, always made me conscious of my own modest apartment. I parked in the driveway behind several luxury cars, already feeling out of place in my 15-year-old sedan packed with homemade food. The trunk and back seat overflowed with containers. I started with the most manageable items, stacking 3 containers and making my way carefully to the front door. No free hand to ring the bell, so I gently kicked the base of the door with my foot. Amanda opened the door, looking lovely in a blue dress that complemented her blonde hair. "Heather, you're here. Let me help you with those." She took the top container as I stepped inside. "Where's James? I have a car full of food to bring in." "He's in the backyard with some guests who arrived early. I'll get him." Amanda disappeared through the house toward the back patio. I stood awkwardly in the entryway, tired legs already protesting the idea of multiple trips to the car. Through the large windows, I could see people in the backyard holding wine glasses, laughing and chatting. Music drifted in, something modern I didn't recognize. Several minutes passed before James appeared, drink in hand, his expression distracted. At 42, he remained handsome. His father's height and blue eyes, my dark hair now stylishly cut and touched with distinguished silver at the temples. "Mom, you're early," he said, checking his watch. "I'm right on time, James. We agreed on 2 o'clock for setup, remember? The party starts at 4. He nodded vaguely. Right. Well, some colleagues showed up early to help set up, and we got started on the drinks." He glanced at the container in my hands. "Is that all the food?" "No, the car's full. I'll need help bringing it all in." James sighed, set his drink down, and followed me outside. His eyes widened at the quantity of food. "Mom, I told you it was just a casual get-together. This looks like enough for an army." "You said 30 people, James. That's not casual, and you know I'd rather have too much than not enough." We made several trips, James becoming increasingly impatient with each load. In the kitchen, I began organizing, identifying which dishes needed oven space for reheating, and which could go directly onto serving platters. Amanda returned to help, her appreciation evident as I uncovered each dish. "Heather, these look amazing. The meatballs smelled just like the ones you made for our engagement party." "Same recipe," I confirmed, pleased she remembered. They were always James's favorite. James had disappeared again, leaving us to organize the food. Through the kitchen window, I could see him laughing with a group of well-dressed people on the patio. Amanda noticed my gaze. "Those are some new friends from the country club," she explained. "James is hoping to get investment clients from their circle." I nodded, understanding now why this anniversary celebration seemed to have morphed into a networking opportunity. The realization stung, but I focused on the food, my contribution, my purpose for being here. As I arranged the appetizers on serving platters, the doorbell rang repeatedly. More guests arrived, bearing gift bags and bottles of wine. I noticed something troubling. Several people carried shopping bags from upscale delicatessens and bakeries. One woman breezed into the kitchen holding a large platter. "Where shall I put the canapés?" she asked Amanda, barely glancing at me. "Oh, Caroline, thank you. You really didn't need to bring anything. James's mother has cooked for us." Amanda gestured toward me. Caroline, 40-something, expensively dressed and coiffed, gave me a quick once-over. How sweet. "But you know Harold is so particular about his smoked salmon. I picked these up from Bergman's this morning." She placed her platter prominently on the island counter, effectively displacing my deviled eggs. The message was clear: store-bought gourmet trumped homemade in this crowd. More guests arrived with more food. Artisanal cheese platters, sushi from an exclusive Japanese restaurant, desserts from a French patisserie. Each addition pushed my homemade dishes further aside, relegated to the back of the counter or inside the warming oven until needed. James returned to the kitchen with an older man in a tailored suit. "Harold, this kitchen remodel was just completed last month. Top-of-the-line everything." Harold nodded approvingly. "Viking range. Good choice. We have the same at our lake house." James beamed at the validation, then noticed me arranging serving utensils. "Oh, Harold, this is my mother, Heather." Harold extended a manicured hand. "Pleasure. James mentioned you'd be helping with the catering today." Catering. The word felt like a slap. I wasn't a hired server. I was family. Before I could respond, Harold spotted the anniversary cake I'd just finished arranging on a stand. "Is that homemade?" he asked, peering at it closely. "Yes," I said, pride momentarily overcoming my fatigue. 3 layers of vanilla bean cake with raspberry filling and buttercream frosting. Harold made a non-committal noise. Carolyn brought a selection from Maison Laurent. They trained their pastry chef in Paris. James quickly steered Harold back toward the patio. "Let me show you the new landscaping we just had done." As guests filled the house, I found myself increasingly isolated in the kitchen. Twice I attempted to join conversations in the living room, only to be interrupted mid-sentence by someone greeting James or Amanda, effectively ending my participation. I retreated to my familiar position by the stove, checking on warming dishes that might never be served. Amanda's sister found me there an hour into the party. "Need any help? You've barely left the kitchen." I smiled gratefully. "I'm fine, just making sure everything stays warm." "You should enjoy the party too. It's family after all." Her kindness nearly brought tears to my exhausted eyes. By 5 o'clock, platters of my appetizers remained largely untouched as guests gravitated toward the store-bought options. I overheard snippets of conversation about vacation homes, private schools, and expensive restaurants, worlds apart from my simple life. One woman mentioned her cleaning lady in the same breath as discussing her recent charity gala committee position, unconscious of the contradiction. I was rearranging the mushroom caps when I heard James's voice from just outside the kitchen doorway. He stood with Harold and 2 other men, drinks in hand, unaware that I could hear them clearly. "Your mother certainly prepared a feast," Harold said, glancing toward the kitchen. James laughed, a sound different from his natural laugh, higher and more performative. "Mom goes overboard with the home cooking. Always has." "My mother was the same," said one of the other men. "Thinks every meal should be Thanksgiving dinner." "I tried to tell her we could have catered," James continued, but she insisted. "You know how mothers are. Need to feel useful." Harold sipped his drink. "What happens to all the leftovers? Looks like enough to feed half the neighborhood." And then it happened. James, my son, who once stood on a chair to help me bake cookies, who had cried with gratitude over simple homemade meals during our hardest times, shrugged and said, "We'll just feed it to the dogs." The men laughed, James the loudest. Harold clapped him on the shoulder. "Better not let her hear that. My mother would have my head." "She's probably too busy rearranging the appetizers to notice anything else," James replied, leading them back toward the patio. I stood frozen, the serving spoons suspended above the untouched meatballs. The words echoed in my head, "Feed it to the dogs," as memories flashed through my mind. James at 7 declaring my chicken soup better than medicine when he had the flu. James at 12 proudly telling his friends that his mom made the best cookies in the neighborhood. James at 18 requesting his favorite comfort foods before leaving for college. What had happened to that boy? When had my cooking, my love, become something to joke about, to dismiss so casually? The kitchen blurred as tears threatened, but I blinked them back. 6 decades of life had taught me that tears solve nothing. Action did. With sudden clarity, I knew exactly what needed to happen next. The initial shock gave way to a hollow feeling in my chest, as if James's words had carved out something essential. I gripped the counter edge, steadying myself against the wave of hurt. Around me, the party continued. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. While inside, I experienced a private earthquake. Needing a moment alone, I slipped down the hallway to the powder room, locked the door, and finally allowed my face to crumple. In the mirror, a tired woman with smudged makeup stared back, gray roots showing at her temples, deep lines etched around her mouth, eyes shining with unshed tears. Was this how James saw me? A relic out of place among his sophisticated friends. The past 24 hours of exhausting work replayed in my mind alongside longer memories, nights spent working multiple jobs to keep him fed, birthdays when I'd created special cakes instead of buying toys we couldn't. Afford care packages sent to college, containing homemade cookies when phone calls would have been cheaper but less tangible. Had all that love expressed through food meant nothing? We'll just feed it to the dogs. The casual cruelty of it caught in my throat. Not even the food was the point. It was the dismissal of my effort, my love, my very presence in his life that cut so deeply. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied lipstick with slightly shaking hands, and took 3 deep breaths. Self-pity would solve nothing. The woman who had raised a child alone after being widowed at 28 hadn't survived by wallowing. She had survived by making difficult decisions and taking action. Returning to the kitchen, I surveyed the spread of food with new eyes. My dishes, lovingly prepared, representing hours of labor and decades of family history, had been pushed aside for store-bought alternatives. A metaphor so obvious it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. What would staying accomplish? I could continue arranging and rearranging food that would likely go uneaten. I could smile through more introductions where people looked past me seconds after learning I was just James's mother. I could pretend I hadn't heard my son mock the love I had poured into this meal. Or I could choose differently. The decision crystallized with surprising clarity. I found a stack of empty plastic containers in Amanda's perfectly organized pantry and began methodically transferring my food from serving dishes back into portable containers. The meatballs still warm. The sliced beef tenderloin with mushroom sauce. The potato gratin. Dish after dish, I reclaimed my work. Amanda walked in as I was securing lids on containers. Her eyes widened in confusion. "Heather, what are you doing?" I continued my task, voice steady. "I'm packing up my food, Amanda." "But why the dinner buffet isn't supposed to start for another hour?" I paused, considering how much to explain. Amanda had always been kind, had appreciated my cooking and my place in James's life. She wasn't responsible for his behavior. I overheard James talking with his friends. "Apparently my food is only fit for dogs." The words came out calmer than I felt. Amanda's face fell. "Oh, Heather, I'm sure he didn't mean it that way. He's had a few drinks and you know how men talk when they're trying to impress each other." Her excuse only underscored the problem. "That's just it, Amanda. The James I raised would never have said something like that, drinks or no drinks. The fact that mocking his mother's efforts now impresses his friends tells me everything I need to know." Amanda placed a hand on my arm. "Please don't go. I'll talk to him." I shook my head. "This isn't about one comment. It's about realizing I don't belong here anymore. Maybe I never did, and that's okay. But I won't leave my food to be wasted or mocked." She helped me pack the remaining dishes in silence, her expression troubled. As I closed the last container, she asked, "What about the cake?" "The anniversary cake. My masterpiece. 3 tiers of vanilla bean cake that had taken hours to perfect." I looked at it, still beautiful on its stand. "That was made for you and James to celebrate 15 years together. It's yours." Amanda's eyes glistened. "He doesn't deserve it. Not after what he said." I thought of the young family they had been, the hope I'd felt watching them exchange vows. Whatever James had become, that history remained true. Marriages have good days and bad days. Today might be a bad one, but the 15 years are still worth celebrating. With Amanda's help, I carried containers to my car, making several trips, while James remained oblivious on the patio with his important guests. The trunk and back seat filled once again, this time with food that would find a different purpose than I had intended. As I closed the trunk, Amanda hugged me. "I'm so sorry, Heather. This isn't right." "Life rarely is," I replied, the wisdom of 65 years behind the simple statement. "Tell James I had an emergency if he asks. He'll call you later when he realizes what happened." I nodded, though I wasn't certain he would notice my absence quickly, let alone the missing food. My phone was in my purse, but for the first time in 40 years, James's call wouldn't be my priority. Sliding behind the wheel, I took one final look at the beautiful house, with its perfect landscaping and gathered guests. Through the large front window, I could see people laughing, raising glasses, living in a world that had increasingly excluded me. The ache in my chest remained, but something else had joined it. A sense of standing up for myself that felt unfamiliar but necessary. As I drove away, my phone began to ring. The dashboard display showed Amanda's name. Then it stopped, and a text message appeared. "From James' mom, where did all the food go? Amanda says you took it." No concern about why I had left. No apology. Just confusion about the missing food. At a red light, I stared at the message, decades of maternal instinct, urging me to explain, to smooth things over, to put his feelings before my own. The light turned green, and I placed the phone back in my purse without responding. For once, James would have to sit with the consequences of his words without his mother rushing to make everything better. I drove aimlessly through town, passing familiar landmarks. The park where I'd pushed James on swings, the library where I'd worked part-time during his school years, the high school he'd graduated from 2 decades earlier. Each place held memories of a relationship that had seemingly dissolved without my noticing, replaced by something conditional and superficial. The car filled with the aroma of cooling food, dishes made with love for people who didn't want them. What now? I couldn't take it all back to my apartment. Most would spoil before I could eat it. Throwing it away seemed wasteful beyond imagining. There had to be some place where good food would be appreciated for what it was, an offering of care. The answer came as I stopped at another red light, and noticed a small sign I'd passed hundreds of times without really seeing: Riverside Community Shelter, all donations welcome. The light changed, and I made a decision, turning left toward a part of town I rarely visited, where need was more common than luxury, and perhaps where food made with love might still matter. The Riverside Community Shelter occupied an old church building, its stone facade weathered but dignified. I parked in the small lot, suddenly uncertain. Would they accept food from a stranger? Was it even allowed by health codes? The containers sat in my car, cooling by the minute, representing hours of work and considerable expense. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed the two smallest containers and approached the entrance. A hand-painted sign directed visitors to the side door. I followed the arrow around the building to a more modest entrance, where a young woman sat at a desk just inside. She looked up with a professional smile. "Can I help you?" The explanation felt strange even in my own mind. How to explain that I was here because my son had hurt my feelings? "I have some food to donate. Quite a lot of food, actually. It's all homemade for a party, but plans changed." Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes showed interest. "What kind of food?" "Appetizers, main dishes, side dishes. Enough for 30 people, all freshly made." "Let me get Maria, our director. She'll need to talk with you." The young woman disappeared through a door, returning moments later with an older woman about my age, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun. "I'm Maria Gonzalez," she said, extending her hand. "Tanya says you have food to donate." I introduced myself and explained the situation in the simplest terms, that I had prepared food for a large gathering that wouldn't be used. I omitted the reason, but something in Maria's perceptive gaze suggested she sensed there was more to the story. "We normally can't accept prepared food without proper documentation," Maria explained, "but we do have some flexibility for special situations. Could I see what you have?" I led her to my car and opened the trunk. Maria's eyes widened at the quantity and variety. "You made all this yourself?" The admiration in her voice soothed some raw part of me. "Over the past 24 hours, yes." Maria inspected several containers, noting the care and preparation. "This looks like professional catering." "I'm just a home cook, but I've been doing it for a long time." She nodded, decision made. "We have about 25 residents tonight, plus 5 staff. This would be an incredible treat. We typically serve donated items from local restaurants and grocery stores. Good food, but nothing like this." Relief flooded me. "So you can use it?" "Absolutely, and if you're willing, we'd love your help serving it. Our residents would appreciate meeting the person who made their dinner special." The invitation surprised me. I had imagined dropping off the food and retreating to lick my emotional wounds in private, but the prospect of seeing my cooking appreciated after being dismissed was tempting. "I'd be happy to stay," I heard myself say. With Maria's help and 2 shelter volunteers, we unloaded my car. The shelter's kitchen was institutional, but clean, with large serving tables and a dining area set up in what had once been the church's fellowship hall. The regular kitchen staff seemed initially skeptical of the unexpected bounty, but warmed up as they uncovered dish after dish. "This beats mystery meat casserole," one older cook said, with a grin admiring the beef tenderloin. While the food was being reheated and arranged for serving, Maria gave me a quick tour of the facility. The shelter provided temporary housing for individuals and families experiencing homelessness, along with support services to help them regain stability. "Many of our residents are working, but housing costs have skyrocketed," Maria explained. "One medical emergency or car repair can be the difference between having an apartment and needing our services." As dinner time approached, residents began gathering in the dining area. I was struck by their diversity: young families with children, elderly individuals, middle-aged men, and women who could have been my neighbors. They didn't match the stereotypes many people hold about homelessness. Maria introduced me briefly before serving began, explaining that I had prepared a special meal for them. The genuine appreciation on their faces as they approached the serving line brought a lump to my throat. "You made all this?" asked a woman about my age as I served her a portion of potato gratin. "I did," I confirmed. "Been years since I had home cooking like this," she said, her plate already filling with colorful options. "I'm Susan, by the way." "Heather," Susan paused, studying my face. You remind me of my mother. She could cook like this too, made everything from scratch. The simple comparison touched me deeply. Susan had the same silver-streaked hair my mother had in her final years, the same direct gaze that seemed to see beyond surface appearances. Where is your mother now? I asked. Past 10 years ago. I still miss her cooking. And her, of course. Susan smiled wryly at her own amendment. I understand completely, I said, and meant it. As serving continued, I noticed a young family at a corner table, mother, father, and 2 children under 10. The children's eyes widened at the array of food so different from the shelter's usual offerings. When the little girl, perhaps 7, approached the dessert table where I was now serving the cookies I'd brought the anniversary cake, having remained at James's house, she stood on tiptoes to see the options. Did you really make these? She asked, pointing to the chocolate chip cookies. I did. My son used to love these when he was your age. Where's your son now? The innocent question caught me off guard. Before I could formulate an answer, my phone rang again. Amanda's name appearing on the screen. I silenced it, but 3 text notifications followed immediately. James is looking for you. He's worried. Please call us. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, focusing instead on the little girl still waiting expectantly for her cookie. My son is a grown-up now with his own life. I finally answered, handing her 2 cookies instead of 1. Sometimes grown-ups get busy and forget the important things. She nodded sagely as if this made perfect sense, thanked me, and skipped back to her family. As the meal progressed, I circulated among the tables, accepting compliments and engaging in conversations that felt more genuine than any I'd experienced at James's party. These people saw me, not as someone's mother or an irrelevant older woman, but as a person who had created something meaningful for them. Maria joined me as the dining room began to empty, residents returning to their quarters or heading to evening programs. You've given them more than a meal tonight, she said quietly. You've given them dignity, the experience of being treated to something special, not just receiving whatever others don't want. Her words captured exactly what I had lost in my relationship with James. Dignity. The recognition of my worth beyond utility. My phone buzzed again with another text from Amanda. James coming to your apartment to check on you. I showed Maria the message. My son doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I went home. Maria raised an eyebrow, but didn't press for details. You're welcome to use our office phone to call him. I was considering this offer when the dining hall door opened and a familiar figure entered, James still in his party clothes but with his tie loosened and hair slightly disheveled. Our eyes met across the room, his widening with confusion. Mom, what are you doing here? The shelter residents still present turned to observe the well-dressed newcomer who so obviously didn't belong. Maria stepped protectively closer to me. Is everything all right, Heather? She asked. Yes, I said, surprised to find it true. This is my son, James. James crossed the room, his expression cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and a touch of anger. I've been calling you for an hour. Amanda said you left the party and took all the food. I gestured to the nearly empty serving tables. As you can see, I found people who appreciated it. He lowered his voice, aware of interested onlookers. Can we talk outside? Maria touched my arm. You don't have to go if you don't want to. The protective gesture nearly brought tears to my eyes. This woman I'd known for only a few hours, offering support that my own son had failed to provide. But this conversation was necessary. It's fine, Maria. Thank you. James and I walked to the parking lot the spring evening, turning cool as dusk approached. We stood beside my old sedan, now empty of its culinary cargo. What the hell, Mom? James didn't bother hiding his anger now that we were alone. You embarrassed me in front of all our guests. People were asking where the food went, why you disappeared. Did you tell them what you said about feeding my food to the dogs? James's face froze, color draining slightly. You heard that? I did. That was just guy talk. I didn't mean anything by it. That's worse, James, that the son I raised would casually mock his mother's efforts to impress people who clearly mean more to him than family. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. You're overreacting. It was a joke. No, it wasn't. It was revealing. of who you've become, and of where I stand in your life." Before he could respond, the shelter door opened. The young family I had noticed earlier emerged, the father carrying a sleeping child. The mother approached us hesitantly. "Excuse me," she said to me, ignoring James. "I just wanted to thank you for the wonderful meal. It's been months since we had food like that." I smiled, genuinely touched. "You're very welcome." "The anniversary cake was beautiful too," she added. 15 years is a long time to be together. Maria must have mentioned the cake's original purpose. The young mother glanced at James, then back to me. "Family is everything. We lost our apartment 3 months ago, but as long as we're together, we'll be okay." She rejoined her husband, and they walked toward the shelter's family wing. James watched them go, his expression unreadable. When they were out of earshot, he turned back to me, anger replaced by something more complex. "You brought my anniversary party food to a homeless shelter. I brought my cooking to people who would value it. There's a difference." For the first time, James seemed to truly look at me, not as his mother, an obligation or embarrassment, but as a person with her own dignity and choices. Something shifted in his eyes. "I messed up, didn't I?" The question held none of his earlier defensiveness. Before I could answer, Maria approached us. "Heather, we're starting cleanup if you'd like to help, or if you need to go." She left the option open, her meaning clear. I had a choice. That choice felt powerful after hours of feeling invisible and dismissed. I turned to my son. "James, I've spent the evening with people who have lost homes, job security, yet they showed more gratitude and human connection than I felt at your party. I'm going to help them clean up now. You can join us, or you can go back to your guests." It was a test, though I didn't frame it that way. What James decided next would tell me everything about whether our relationship could be salvaged. He looked between me and Maria, then at the shelter building. After a moment's hesitation, he removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "I'll help," he said quietly. James followed me back into the shelter, his designer shoes out of place on the worn linoleum floors. Maria raised an eyebrow but welcomed his offer to help, directing us to the kitchen where cleanup was underway. I introduced James to the staff simply as my son, offering no explanation for his sudden appearance or formal attire. The kitchen bustled with activity, shelter residents and volunteers washing dishes, storing leftover food, wiping down surfaces. James stood awkwardly for a moment before Susan, the older woman who had reminded me of my mother, handed him an apron. "Those fancy clothes won't clean themselves if you splash on them," she said matter-of-factly. "Dish duty is that way." To his credit, James took the apron and headed to the industrial sink without complaint. I joined the food storage team, helping package the modest leftovers for tomorrow's lunch. From my position, I could see James at the sink, sleeves rolled to his elbows, working alongside a middle-aged man with weathered hands. "That your boy Susan?" asked, appearing at my elbow with empty containers. "Yes, my only child." She studied him thoughtfully. "Looks like he's used to someone else doing the dishes." The simple observation contained no judgment, just truth. "He is," I acknowledged. "My son was the same way before life humbled him," Susan replied. "Lost his banking job in 2008, then his house. Lived here for 3 months before getting back on his feet. Best thing that ever happened to him, he says now." The parallel wasn't lost on me. James hadn't lost his material success, but something more important was at risk: his connection to his roots, his empathy, his character. As cleanup progressed, I noticed James engaging in conversation with his dishwashing partner. Their words weren't audible over the kitchen noise, but I saw my son's expression change from polite distance to genuine interest. The man was gesturing animatedly, telling some story that had James nodding thoughtfully. Maria approached as I finished labeling the last container of leftovers. "Your son is getting quite an education tonight," she observed. "We both are," I replied. "He's invited everyone to join us at the tables," Maria continued. "Says he wants to talk with us all." Curious, I followed Maria to the dining area where residents and volunteers were gathering. James stood at the front, still wearing the apron, his tie now completely removed and shirt collar unbuttoned. He looked younger somehow, more like the boy I remembered. "I want to thank you all for letting me help tonight," he began once everyone was seated, "and for sharing your stories with me. I especially want to thank Kevin for the dishwashing lessons." He nodded toward his sink partner, who raised a hand in acknowledgement. James continued, his voice gaining confidence. I came here looking for my mother, angry that she'd left my anniversary party and taken the food she'd prepared. What I found instead was a lesson in perspective. I sat quietly stunned by this public acknowledgement. My mother spent 24 hours cooking for my party, James explained to the room. She put all her love and skill into creating an amazing meal, and He paused, meeting my eyes across the room. I made a thoughtless joke about feeding it to dogs. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the group. Susan, seated beside me, clicked her tongue. "No wonder you brought the food here," James heard her comment. "Yes, and I'm grateful she did. Because sitting here tonight, hearing your stories, I realized how much I've taken for granted. Not just my mother's cooking, but her sacrifices, her love, her presence in my life." The room had grown completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had paused to listen. When Kevin told me about losing his engineering job and living in his car for 6 months before coming here, it hit me. My mother worked 3 jobs when I was a kid to make sure we never experienced that insecurity. She gave up her own dreams to secure mine. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This moment wasn't about making James feel guilty or absolving him with easy emotions. It was about truth long overdue. James was still speaking. The young boy who shared his cookie with me, Elijah, asked if I knew how to make cookies like my mom. I had to admit I didn't, that I'd never learned any of her recipes despite growing up watching her cook. That's on me, not her. Maria stood beside James, now a supportive presence. "What will you do differently going forward?" She asked the question directed at James, but clearly intended for everyone's benefit. James considered this thoughtfully. "Start by asking my mother to teach me those recipes if she's willing. Stop chasing approval from people who don't know or care about my roots. Remember that true wealth isn't in my bank account, but in relationships like the ones I've witnessed here tonight." His words sounded sincere, but I'd heard promises before. The real test would be his actions in the days and weeks to come. Still, something had shifted. I could see it in his stance, his expression, the way he looked directly at me instead of past me. After the impromptu gathering dispersed, James and I helped with final cleanup. As we worked side by side wiping down tables, he spoke quietly. "I should have stood up for you when those people brought their fancy catered food. I should have proudly served what you made." "Yes, you should have," I agreed, not making it easier for him. "I got lost somewhere along the way, Mom, caught up in impressing people who probably wouldn't help if I ever really needed it." "Success isn't the problem, James. It's forgetting who helped you achieve it." He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "Amanda was upset with me after you left, said I'd been taking you for granted for years, and she was tired of making excuses for me." This surprised me. Amanda said that she threatened to leave the party too, said 15 years was too long to be married to someone who couldn't appreciate his own mother. I smiled slightly. I always liked that girl. As we prepared to leave the shelter, Maria handed me a volunteer application. "We could use someone with your cooking skills on a regular basis," she said. "No pressure, but consider it." The idea appealed immediately. Using my passion to serve people who genuinely appreciated it, finding purpose beyond family obligations, now that James was grown. I tucked the application into my purse, promising to think about it. In the parking lot, James insisted on following me home despite my assurances that I was perfectly capable of driving myself. The exchange felt familiar. The parent-child relationship temporarily reversed with him, now concerned for my welfare. Perhaps there was room for this new dynamic between us, as long as it came with mutual respect. The next morning, James arrived at my apartment carrying coffee and bagels. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't slept well. "Amanda sent me to formally apologize and to ask when you're free for a family dinner," he said as I let him in. "Just the 3 of us." "I'd like that," I replied, accepting the peace offering of breakfast. We sat at my small kitchen table, the same one where I'd taught him to write his name and helped with countless homework assignments. The silence between us felt weighted with history and possibility. "I meant what I said last night," James finally spoke. "I want to learn your recipes. Not just for myself, but to pass them down someday if Amanda and I have kids." The mention of possible grandchildren, something I'd long ago stopped hoping for, caught me by surprise. "You never mentioned wanting children before." James shrugged. "Seemed too complicated with our lifestyle. But lately, Amanda's been talking about what really matters. Last night was a wake-up call for both of us. Over the following weeks, a new pattern emerged. Every Sunday afternoon, James would arrive at my apartment for cooking lessons. We started with basics, the pancakes he loved as a child, the meatballs that had been relegated to the back of the buffet at his party. Amanda joined occasionally, her presence bridging awkward moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. I accepted Maria's invitation to volunteer at the shelter initially once a week, teaching cooking skills to residents interested in food service jobs. The purpose and community fulfilled something I hadn't realized was missing. Susan became a friend, her straight-talking wisdom reminding me of my own mother. 3 months after the anniversary party incident, James invited me to dinner at their home. I arrived with modest expectations and a homemade dessert. Old habits die hard. The house looked the same from outside, but inside subtle changes were evident. Family photos previously confined to private spaces now held prominent positions. A cookbook stood open on the kitchen counter pages, splattered with sauce, evidence of actual use. James greeted me with a genuine hug. Perfect timing. I just finished making Grandma's corn pudding. The table was set simply but beautifully, no evidence of the status-conscious entertaining that had characterized the anniversary party. Amanda squeezed my hand as she took my coat. He's been cooking all day. Nervous as a cat about whether it'll meet your standards. Dinner wasn't perfect. The corn pudding had too much pepper, the chicken was slightly overdone, but it was made with care and attention. We ate in the kitchen rather than the formal dining room conversation, flowing naturally about work friends, the shelter where I now volunteered regularly. After dinner, James disappeared into the study, returning with a leather-bound book. "This is for you," he said, placing it before me. I opened it to find blank recipe cards, the first few already filled with my recipes in James's handwriting. "I've been taking notes during our Sunday lessons," he explained. "But I wanted you to add the stories behind the recipes. When you first made them, who taught them to you, special memories associated with each one." The thoughtfulness of the gift overwhelmed me. This wasn't just about preserving recipes. It was about honoring our family history, acknowledging my contribution to his life beyond the meals themselves. "I'd be happy to," I managed, running my fingers over the pages that would connect past to future. That night, driving home, I reflected on the journey of the past months. The hurt of James's careless comment hadn't disappeared completely. Some wounds leave permanent marks, but healing had begun. More importantly, new foundations were being built on honesty and mutual respect. At 65, I had found new purpose, sharing my cooking skills at the shelter, forming friendships with people whose life experiences differed greatly from mine, but whose humanity and dignity matched anyone's. I had learned to value myself beyond my role as James's mother, to set boundaries while maintaining love. James was learning too, reconnecting with values that material success had temporarily obscured, discovering the satisfaction of creating rather than merely consuming, appreciating the simple pleasures that money couldn't buy. The anniversary party that had gone so terribly wrong had ultimately led to something valuable, a second chance at an authentic relationship between mother and son. Not perfect, not without occasional tensions, but grounded in truth rather than performance or obligation. As I parked outside my apartment building, my phone dinged with a message from James. "Thanks for coming tonight. Shelter dinner tomorrow at 5. Susan says they're expecting a full house." I smiled, typing my reply. "I'll be there. Save me a spot at the sink." Some lessons come late in life, but they're no less valuable for their timing. Standing up for myself had seemed frightening, but ultimately led to greater respect and deeper connections. The food intended for an anniversary party had nourished not only bodies but souls, mine included. Where are you in your journey of setting healthy boundaries with loved ones? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between accepting disrespect or walking away? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to demand dignity in our relationships. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Remember, true love never requires sacrificing your self-respect.